the Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, Ministry of Technical and Higher Education and partners are set to host the 2025 Education Week from January 20th to the 24th in Bombali District. Now, the theme for this year is AI and Education, providing human agency in a world of automation. The event will focus on integrating artificial intelligence into education while nurturing human creativity and emotional intelligence, and will also be reviewing the education sector in 2024 and what the future holds in 2025. So to speak about all of these things this morning and more, we've been joined by Dr. Haja Ramatulai Wuri, Minister of Technical and Higher Education, and Conrad Saki, Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education. Good morning, lady and gentlemen. It's a pleasure having you this morning. This is your very first time to our studio.
Hello, I've been here before.
I can tell from Mr. Saki, it is your first.
Well, this is the first time in the new
in a long
studio.
while. Okay.
Yes.
Well, you're heartily welcome.
Thank you.
Indeed, I'll begin with you, Mr. Saki. So, what would this mean, particularly referencing the theme AI? What role does new technology play in our education landscape?
It's interesting. I think we've always seen technology as a tool that helps us, that will help us to leapfrog our way to the 21st century, taking into consideration that we have had a series of shocks in the past. So, for example, in Sierra Leone, we've had the Civil War, we've had Ebola, we've had COVID, and all of those things have led to learning loss in the sector. And therefore, in order to regain the lost time in terms of the lost knowledge that the young people have experienced, we've always seen technology as a way of doing that, as a tool that we use to address that. And so we have been introducing technology in a range of things. We've used technology in teaching and learning. So, for example, we have an AI app that helps teachers to customize their lesson plan to meet the specific needs of the diverse group of students that they are teaching. We also have technology which we use in terms of the results, so it helps us to analyze the results, and the young people can access their results, which we call the results checker. We also use technology and AI to map out areas of risk in terms of climate change, and we then respond to that in terms of putting mitigating circumstances or framework to address those risks. We also use technology in service delivery as well. We sometimes use low technology, so we have a radio teaching program, which is a low technology. And we have high technology where we use apps to monitor attendance of teachers and learners. But I think the focus of this theme is that whilst we are using all of these new technologies, we should not forget the input of humans. And they should not actually act, technology should not replace. So, for example, if we take, for example, teachers are not just there as facilitators of information, whilst your technology would be there to give you data insights and things like that. Teachers are there to be mentors, to be counselors, and all of those sort of things, which are about relationships, which technology may not be able to detect. And so it's blending the two and making sure that they complement each other.
Doctor, is this the same for you?
My colleague has said a lot that is also applicable to our sector, and artificial intelligence is here, and it's something that we have to face and see how we can incorporate it better into educational systems at technical and higher education. And for us as a sector, what we have done is to develop a policy on the use of artificial intelligence, ethical use of artificial intelligence in higher educational institutions. And this was spearheaded by one of our agencies, the Tertiary Education Commission, supported by the Commonwealth of Learning. And beyond developing the policy, we have also held a series of engagements with stakeholders, university officials, university leaders on the policy itself to ensure that when we implement the policy, there's going to be buy-in and there's going to be a general consensus that we need to use AI ethically within educational systems. Because we can all agree that there's unethical use of artificial intelligence. As we've heard from my colleague, artificial intelligence is a tool. And we want to train our young people to be able to compete with their peers on the global scale. And it's something that is being utilized in other parts of the world. So we have to ensure that we embrace artificial intelligence, but do so ethically. And there are a number of ways that we can do so in terms of research. How do we help? How can artificial intelligence help you to organize your thoughts better? So it's getting you to you think, and you get the tool, the artificial intelligence tool, to help you, not using the AI to think for you. So I think that's the most important thing. And so once we start implementing this policy, then I think the taboo, I suppose, of using AI will be addressed, and young people, learners and educators will be familiar and used to utilizing artificial intelligence and use it as a tool to help them get better learning outcomes.
What particular new set of programs will this particular year's Education Week give birth to?
Well, first of all, let me just add something to my opening statement. The Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education is also developing a digital learning strategy, and it's there to make sure that we have a framework within which we can work, and it looks at the gaps that we have in technology, the reasons why we're using technology, what do we expect from technology, and in what specific areas. It also addresses also the issues of capabilities of our staff to be able to use technology. And so I just wanted to mention that. In terms of the program for the week, well, the program for the week is broad-ranging. So there would be, we're expecting His Excellency the President and the First Lady to attend the final day of the event, which is on the 24th. We're also expecting the Vice President to also be there to launch the week. We will also have panel discussions, which will be ministerial panels. We'll have professional panels. We also have debates involving young people. There will also be stalls from various universities, tech books, and even schools. So there's a wide range. The program is very broad-based in terms of what we intend to do. And also it gives us an opportunity for some of our donor partners to also exhibit some of the interventions that they've used quite successfully. And it's also an opportunity for parents to find out about the various levels of education, the different pathways that we have in those levels, something that perhaps parents are not always aware of. So this is really an opportunity for us to showcase what we do within the sector, but it's also an opportunity for us as ministers and professionals to listen to feedback from the people and use that to shape what we are going to be doing 2025 and beyond.
Doctor, the tertiary realm of education be also chiming in on this particular observation. It's in the week.
Education Week, I see it as a week of celebrating the gains that we have made within the sector, so both at basic and senior secondary and at technical and higher education. So it's a platform wherein both ministries can update the general public as to what we've been doing, aligning it to the theme of the year. So this year would be artificial intelligence and automation, but also what we've been doing to support the government's development agenda, so the Big Five. So as we've heard from my colleague, it will be there will be a series of exhibitions. So from technical institutions, they will be showcasing what they have done within the technical space. What are the products that they have developed, so pushing for the entrepreneurship dimension, and also within our universities as well, what they're doing to support His Excellency's Big Five game changers. And we'll also be hearing from our partners as to what they're doing as well to support both ministries. We have a joint education sector plan, and we meet periodically to assess progress, and there will be a session during that week where we get to update members of the general public about what we're doing as informed by the plan. It also gives us an opportunity not just to celebrate also, but also to learn from each other, in the sense that we may be grappling with a challenge that a partner might have the solution for. We'll be able to see the solution there and then. And I always say it's a week for us to pause as a sector. We reflect on the gains that we have made collectively, so both ministries, the learning institutions and our partners, and then we look at what are the lessons that we have learned, and then we raise the bar in implementing for the next year, leading up to Education Week for 2026.
It's a good thing that both of you are here this morning. It's a very rare spectacle, actually, having both ministers who had the education sector present in a particular program. It's indeed a privilege. I would love to use the opportunity to just, have a retrospect of, the education landscape since 2018 when the free quality education was launched. I'll begin with you, Mr. Saki. Do you think everything is going on quite well as planned, as in quality, free education?
Well, I think in a sense, I would quite categorically say that we have made some significant gains. At the same time, I would say that we still continue to have challenges. Some of those challenges are as a result of how successful we have been. So let me start off with the gains. I like the fact that you separated the free from the quality. In terms of free, I see the free education policy as a pro-poor policy. A policy which was there predominantly to remove the financial burden of parents, and in doing so, provided access to every child to access the same opportunities. Whether you are the director of an MDA, or whether you're the child of the director of an MDA, or your father is the driver of that MDA, you will have the opportunities, the same opportunities. And so what you've seen in terms of the free, we've removed the cost of school fees. We offer free exams. We offer free textbooks. And now we're even getting better. I mean, the ratio of textbooks was 1 to 3 in some cases. We are now moving to 1 to 1. So we have got better in terms of that. We also offer free school meals. And nowadays we cover 15 out of 16 districts in the country. We offer free, to a certain extent, free health care facilities. So for example, in all of our schools now, you will have a first aid kit. That's something that we are working on right now. So that free aspect, I think we have done quite well. As a result of that, we've seen an additional 1 million young people coming into the school roll, yes, which is phenomenal by every measure. But that also has created a challenge in terms of housing these young people. Now, in terms of the quality, that's what we are focused on at the moment. So we've had quality before, but we need to improve the quality. And because quality is a continuous improvement cycle. It is not a state of being, it's something that you keep on working on. It is not, I often tend to see it as not a sprint, but a marathon. So you need to continue to do that. So in the quality aspect, we have had a series of education reforms. So as I speak, for example, last year, we are developing teaching and learning materials for Class 1, what is now called P1, in literacy and numeracy. We have developed the materials and we are procuring that, and that should be available by the end of the month as we are introducing foundational learning. We are also having reforms in terms of the way we assess our young people. So one of the things that we want to do in 2025 is to set up a national assessment unit. It is critical that we look at the way we assess our young people, because we have spent the first 5 years looking at what we teach. So I could comfortably say that we've introduced 4 different curricula in the system. We have one for early childhood development, we have one for basic education, we have one for civic education, and then we have one for senior secondary school education. Now we need to be asking ourselves, how do we teach? So we are introducing new methodologies in terms of teaching. So in terms of foundational learning, we are using the science of learning, which is completely different from what we have done in the past. And the reason why we are doing that is because when we have done a national baseline assessment, which we did in 2021, we noticed that we had some significant problems with learning poverty. Now, learning poverty is defined as having a child aged 10 who can read but cannot comprehend. And if you can read and cannot comprehend, you have a serious challenge, because the further you get into the educational space, you will then be required to apply critical thinking. And so as a government, we are spending a significant amount of resources to make sure that we get foundational learning right. And in the President's New Year's message, he also singled out the fact that we are focused on foundational learning. And incidentally, Sierra Leone is one of the leaders in terms of the development of foundational learning in the continent of Africa. So we have been recognized for some of the things that we are doing, but we need to make sure that we execute our aspirations and our mission, and to make sure that it starts to pay dividend in terms of impact. So those are the sort of things that we are doing. But let me also just mention another thing, that of the senior secondary school curriculum. We have one of the most innovative senior secondary school curriculums in the continent. It's divided into 3 main themes, what we call core subjects, what we call applied subjects, and what we call everyday subjects. So we are now developing the assessment methodologies to be able to assess those. And so those are the sort of focus that we have in terms of improving the quality of what we deliver.
Doctor, I'll speak to tertiary institutions now. It seems there's a cloud of understanding deficiency hanging over this country. I mean, Mr. Sake has just explained it in summary. People read. This idea of rote learning in Sierra Leone is causing some serious or malicious damage to our graduates, don't you think? They are being forced to read, pass with good grades, but cannot understand anything they've read.
I think a lot of what we do within the Ministry of Technical and Higher Education is building upon the gains that the Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary, because that's the only way we can protect the investment that has gone into that sector and ensure that we position our young people to contribute positively to societal development. And that might be a challenge, but then we are using technology to see how we can address that. So there's a big agenda within the Ministry of Technical and Higher Education to do more with regards to digital skills training and getting our young people to think outside the box and not just about reading and reproducing what you have learned, what you have read without fully understanding. You need to be able to apply what you have learned in a real life context. And that would entail looking at the curriculum and ensuring that we revise the curriculum to speak to the labor market. And that's an activity that we undertook last year, where we were given some funds from the World Bank and we did a labor market survey for specific sectors. These sectors were linked to our National Development Plan, and we have referred to them as growth sectors. And the whole point of the exercise was to speak to industry players, so those who will employ our graduates, and ask them what are the skills you would like to see in a young person within this sector. Now, what we do with the output of that exercise is what would help us to address that challenge. And that would be using that to inform curriculum review, but also ensuring that the trainers are capacitated to deliver that. But it also creates a platform where we have strengthened our linkage with industry players, because now we're asking them, what would you like to see in a young person when they graduate for them to be able to thrive within your sector? So that goes a long way in helping us to train in a demand-led manner. It increases the chance of employment of a young person, because now when you graduate, you have the skills needed for the current market. But there's also a window of opportunity for us to replicate the same for emerging sectors. So using horizon scanning, looking ahead, what are the sectors that will potentially be a growth sector in the future, and start positioning ourselves now. So using that very proactive approach. And I mentioned earlier that we also have plans to use digital platforms. We can all agree that we live in a digital era, and we have to ensure that we use that to enhance what we're doing. And within technical and higher education, I've already mentioned about the open distance learning. No, I haven't. We have developed an open distance learning policy, and that is, as it says, you acquire education without physically going into a university. And the reason why we have done that is...
Excuse me, just to interrupt, who is that for?
Open
What age
distance
brackets are
learning
you
policy
targeting?
is for the sector.
Across the board?
It's for the sector. But it will be introduced in a way that is applicable to our context.
Okay.
So it's doing it in a stepwise approach and using the lessons learned, and we scale up gradually. And one approach that we're thinking is using a hybrid approach, wherein a student, for example, can come in for X amount of days physically, and then they stay home and they're able to access learning materials remotely. And the reason why we need to do so is because one of the gains of the free quality school education is that we're seeing massive enrollment now. We're seeing a lot of young people taking the WAS exams. And currently, we have 12 public and private universities, and we have government technical institutes as well, both public and private. And for now, there's a big push for young people to go to university, and we're working to change that. And what I mean by that is, yes, you can have some going to university, but there's also the vocational training route, where in other parts of the world, it's it's what you do to build up your middle manpower, and that directly translates into developing societal development. So we're working to change the perception, the quality, and the relevance of TVET. So that would see, hopefully in the near future, where we see a critical mass of young people opting to go down technical route as opposed to universities. I'll give you an example. When I assumed office in 2023, 249,000 young people took the WAS exams. 137,000 met the minimum requirement for university. And combined, both public and private universities that we have, so 12 in total, they were not able to absorb up to 40% of that number. And what happens is that the bulk of those who are not able to gain admissions, they wait for the next admission cycle, because the goal is to get to university. But that should not be the case. They should opt for vocational training. We're not saying it should be a second thought. It should not be, if I've tried to get to university and I have failed, then I try the vocational route. It should be something that we should identify from quite early on. So myself and the Minister of Basic, it's something that we've been talking about. How can we set up technical schools at senior secondary level? So we've identified that this young person is more hands-on. Vocational training is all about hands-on, and create a pathway for them to go from technical school to government technical institute and we have technical college, we have technical universities, Multi-Magai Technical University and Eastern Technical University. So we're not limiting them to say you can only get to a certain level. We have our national qualification framework that will see them going as far as PhD, generating knowledge. So when we're trying to change that perception of vocational training, but also improve upon the quality and the relevance. So back to the distance learning policy for universities and vocational training. So that's something that we are pushing because it helps a young person to acquire digital skills. We've also signed an MOU with the National Skills Development Corporation in India to help us develop a platform for skills acquisition, both for pre-service and also in service, so it supports lifelong learning. And that is a platform where the ODL policy will help in terms of acquiring technical skills. What the lifelong learning and skills development platform will support is acquiring soft skills, skills that you need to be a better professional, things like emotional intelligence, financial literacy, digital literacy, entrepreneurship, teamwork, communication, and that is generic across the board. These are skills that you need to be a better professional. So we're confident then that introducing these reforms will help the young people to think innovatively, to think outside the box, to be able to apply what they have learned in the classroom or the lecture room and link that back to entrepreneurship and become job creators as opposed to job seekers. We're working with partners to see how we can support that even further, so entrepreneurship, and support His Excellency's agenda for youth employment, where we see young people coming together, having access to startups, forming cooperatives, so we're not saturating specific markets, but then addressing societal problems, so social entrepreneurship. And we have existing resources already within our universities. For example, IPAM, the business school at the University of Sierra Leone, has a Center for Excellence, Entrepreneurship and Innovation. So we could see, we could use that space more and support a young person who has the technical skills, they have the technical knowledge, they have the entrepreneurship skills, and we can help them to be job creators and contribute towards social enterprise.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Mr. Saki, the number of pupils passing the WASC and Beke, as you've been reading them year in, year out, keeps ballooning, keeps swelling on a yearly basis. But what's ironic, I mean, all of this is the number of failure, we've been receiving from these pupils who want to enroll at universities, particularly, let's take for instance the mass communication department at Frobe College, where they've been failing with flying colors en masse, in the basic requirement for the English diagnostic exam, just to make it into, the department. What do you think is wrong? They would have had like straight A's in all of their subjects, but they fail in these common exams, and it's 30, by the way, so that's a passing mark for that exam.
Well, let me, I don't know what is wrong because we haven't done any piece of research on it, but let me speak very generically. The phenomena is not new. If you look at developed countries, whether it's the US and in the UK, where they have entrance exams for universities, students that have passed public exams are sometimes challenged. Now, from an educational perspective, my analysis would be that in schools, sometimes teachers teach to pass the exams. So you teach according to the syllabus. And if you teach according to the syllabus, that student turns up in the exam, they're going to pass the exams. Now, when you go to a university entrance exams, it is not just testing the acquisition of knowledge. It is actually you testing even common sense. Yes, and it's actually testing all the knowledge requirements other than what is academic. And therefore, that's where lies the challenge. You could say the same thing in England. You have entrance exams for even jobs, certain jobs, and people turn up with 2-1s and first class, and they fail. Now, do you then say that the university, the quality of the university, of the education, is suspect? The answer is no. because what they're testing is not what, it's not based on the syllabus. It is based on either your emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and other things. And so I think that's why you have that sort of problem. But I think it is worthwhile for us to conduct some research for us to find out what the real issue is. But as I say, you know, for my 35 years plus experience in education, I don't think that this phenomena is peculiar to Sierra Leone.
Embracing modernity, you know, in academia has also posed a beguiling challenge to a lot of, you know, teachers, I would say, in the country. Are there opportunities for overseas, you know, traveling for these teachers to be exposed to learn more modern skills, if you like to call it that, and come back and implement them in the classroom?
Yes, there are opportunities. I mean, most foreign embassies do offer scholarships to our teachers. But what we also do quite periodically is we offer in-service training for our teachers. So as you may be aware, I was the chair of the Teaching Service Commission. On a yearly basis, we have trained over 40,000 teachers. Invariably, when we do these trainings, we have brought in technical assistants from abroad. So there's a knowledge transfer. And the reason why that approach is perhaps more financially viable is the fact that you have a broad range of people who can then attend those courses. We'll continue to do that. Let me just give you an example. Just in December, we trained over 14,000 teachers. You may recall that in my earlier submission, I did say to you that we have introduced a new approach to teaching foundational learning using the science of learning. And so we had to retrain our teachers to acquire these new skills. And so that's what we do to upgrade their pedagogy. Yeah. And we'll continue to do this, but we do have assistance from foreign countries to help us to send our teachers to abroad for training as well. And by the way, I also take teachers abroad when I go to conferences. So the last conference I attended, it was one based on foundational learning, and I took the teacher who won the Presidential Best Teachers Award for the primary level to that conference, because what I wanted her to see was to do two things. One, to have insight into what is happening in other countries. Secondly, to visit schools. It was in Rwanda, to visit schools in Rwanda, so that they see that some of the challenges that they have, even in Rwanda, that we think is this model of excellence, it's the same as what we have in Sierra Leone. And also to share good practice between professionals for them to see how they tackle those problems, and for her to come back and use that experience with other her peers in Sierra Leone.
Doctor, a major requirement for most, you know, graduates is to have written at least a thesis, you know, or form of dissertation of sort, which would say it's a symbolic way of signing off from the university. But what we've been seeing of late is that the integrity in writing these things has dropped, you know, the purity in writing. A lot of students cannot conduct research, academic research, you know. Largely, we've seen a picture where the theses of most of these students are being written by other people, you know, and even after they had written these things, what we see is that in other countries, as I have read before even this morning, is that some of these theses are being used to solve problems in these countries. You know, for instance, I wrote, while I was, some years ago actually, medicine and television, you understand, and the capability of the screen, you know, to help educate the public and to become more healthy. But after you've written that beautiful thing, nothing comes out of it. They're either dumped at the back of some building or being given to hawkers to sell bread somewhere. It's quite disheartening. How can we change this?
That's a very interesting question, and I'm glad you brought that up. So as you know, I served within the medical school, the College of Medicine and Allied Health Sciences, before being appointed by His Excellency. And I was involved part of my duty was supervising students, medical students, pharmacy students, nursing students, and med lab students for their final year dissertation. And so that has given me embedded insights into some of the challenges that we have within that space, but it also creates an opportunity for us to do something about that. And one thing in my experience also involved in research within the medical school is that I ensured that the research that I was engaged in spoke to a national need. It was needs-based, because that's the whole point about research, generating evidence to inform policy and practice. It has to be relevant. And a few months ago, I convened a meeting with professional heads from ministries, departments and agencies and universities to create a dialogue platform where we could talk about how do we address this problem and further strengthen the linkage between universities and ministries, departments and agencies, because universities should be at the forefront of generating evidence that government can use to inform policy, and that can be translated into practice. And what I wanted from that meeting was for the ministries, departments and agencies to send in a list of areas, issues that they're grappling with now within their sector. And the ministry will then collate that by sector and send to the relevant institution and say, right, when the students get to their final year, ensure that their research question speaks to the gaps that we have identified coming from the ministries. And the benefit of that is, one, I think it would be very motivating for a young person to know that the research that I'm doing is actually valued by a ministry, a department or an agency. And it also creates a platform for a young person to engage with that ministry, department or agency. There's the opportunity for them to be able to translate the evidence that they're generating in real time. And I think that would also increase their chances of employment within that ministry, department or agency if there's a vacancy, because if you do a very good job, your chances of being retained or recruited will be increased. So a lot of other suggestions came out of that meeting, so it's still work in progress, but that's the direction of the ministry, to ensure that a young person in university, before graduating, they should have this understanding that whatever you do should contribute positively towards societal development. But there's another side to that as well, wherein we have to ensure that the universities also position a young person to be able to conduct research well. And that entails teaching them, grounding them in research methodology from a very early stage. So when it gets to their final year and they have to do this research, they're well versed with the process of conducting research, and they're familiar with the research methodology across the spectrum. So that would entail ensuring that there is a curriculum being introduced from year one, if possible, so students gradually they build upon that, and when they get to their final year, they're able to conduct research effectively. I know within the medical school there's something that we have been doing over the last few years. There's a 2-week block for research methodology, so we can use the lessons learned from that to scale up. And there's also a need for us to capacitate our trainers, because our lecturers, because you cannot be a lecturer supervising a student if you are not fully grounded in research yourself. And so we're working with our universities to develop a capacity building fund for early to mid-career researchers within universities that they can tap into, help in terms of their capacity building, continued professional development, expand their network, and take up their role as researchers, because there are 3 core functions of universities: research, teaching and community service. So that's one of the initiatives that we're using to ensure that the trainers are also capacitated to supervise the students well. And we can also use technology when it comes to student writing skills. And we know that we have a challenge. We have people out there who will write dissertations for students, and the way to do so is, the way we can address that is ensuring that we ground the students really well in research methodology. And if you have the lecturers capacitated, they will be able to pick up, because everybody has a writing style. So if a student has submitted a proposal and they have a specific writing style, and then fast forward a few months, they submit a dissertation that is beautiful, you'll be able to pick up that there's a difference in the writing style. And we can also use technology. We have plagiarism software in other parts of the world. We can incorporate that into an education management system in Sierra Leone, where students will submit their work, and this tool will be able to tell us if it's been plagiarized from some place or not. But I think ultimately, if we ensure that we develop training material and we really ground the students in the principles of research and they understand, then there's no need. With time, we will wean them off this need to go and seek someone else to do their research, and also help them to start thinking about how they can publish their research findings and contribute to the general body of knowledge.
So, Saki, you've been taking notes for a while. Are there particular things you'd like to reference?
Well, I was actually struck by the question you asked about rote learning. Yeah. And I think it has been a challenge in the basic education sector. And we have been looking at ways and means of addressing those. So if you look at the senior secondary school curriculum, we have core subjects, which are basically the subjects that are traditional subjects. But we also have applied subjects. And when you start to introduce concepts like applied subjects, then the assessment methodology becomes slightly different. Because what you're now asking people to do is not just to reproduce the knowledge or the information that you've given to them, but actually getting them to apply those knowledge. And there are a couple of things that I've seen in recent times in Sierra Leone that gives me room for quite joy, I would say, or delight. So, for example, I have witnessed a robotic competition. And mind you, this is not only, I've seen it in the private schools, I've also seen it in public schools. And this is students applying their knowledge in a competitive way. I've also recently went to a business speech competition where 7 schools competed to present business ideas, and I think it was won by the Sierra Leone Grammar School, and my school was also part of it, the Albert Academy. We've also seen mock debates in Parliament, and I have been extremely impressed with what we've seen. There are clips on social media where they have debates in schools. These are all things that, you're allowing that student to use their creativity, their critical thinking, and apply things. We've started to see project-based learning in our schools. We've seen the way we ask questions are no longer closed questions, it's open-ended questions, so that they have the opportunity to be able to open up and use their own critical thinking in the answers to the questions. We've seen in some of the assessment methodologies that we are developing the use of real-life applications, and we've seen also portfolio building. These are all techniques that you use in education to make sure that you move away from rote learning, where they're asking you to reproduce what you've learned, to applying what you've learned. And I think that it provides what I would call a thorough grounding for even the research skills that you will need later on in university.
I've observed with keen interest that the appetite for reading has woefully dropped in Sierra Leone. People are not interested in reading any longer, and that has badly dented or affected the quality of education in Sierra Leone. What people don't understand is that reading books actually add to your knowledge base, vocabulary, arsenal of words, and everything else. It exposes you to the real world. Reading the thoughts of others can improve education tremendously. And the doctor earlier spoke about having soft skills. some of these soft skills can be gotten from reading other books, other topics, other areas, you know. How do you think we can revitalize the culture of reading in Sierra Leone? I'll start with you, Mr. Saki.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, let me just address the issue of soft skills. In our foundational learning package, Sierra Leone is rather unique, and I often go abroad and I talk about this, and very confidently, and I'm very proud that we've taken the approach that we've taken. Normally when you talk about foundational learning, people consider literacy and numeracy as the key. In Sierra Leone, we do 5 components. We have literacy, we have numeracy, we have socio-emotional skills. So those soft skills are developed through socio-emotional skills. Now, it's not a separate subject. It is applied in the teaching of literacy and numeracy. We also have digital skills, and the last, but by no means the least, is civic education. And again, you know our history from the war, so we need to be more tolerant and learn to live with each other. So civic education runs through the entire spectrum of what we deliver. So that's how we promote foundational learning. The issue of reading, I must say again, this is an interesting one. It is not peculiar to Sierra Leone. Even in the UK, kids don't read anymore. The reason being they have to compete with their computer games. They have to compete with watching TikTok, you know, as opposed to reading Mills and Booms, which I'm sure my colleague minister read quite a lot of, because I know her vocabulary is very broad. You know, in our days, we used to have those war comics, you know, which was my age. But these things are no longer there because the competition that you have with social media is quite vast. However, we have recognized this, and we are working with the World Bank to develop supplementary reading list. So with the World Bank, we're going to work with the Sierra Leone Library Board to provide additional reading materials on top of what we have in the academic requirements. Yes, so that's how we intend to do it. But I think also, seriously, we have a problem these days. Our kids are exposed to things that we were not exposed to, and you know that 5 minutes TikTok can give you an insight, but it doesn't mean that you read. You don't pick up vocabularies. You might have the insights, but not necessarily the vocabulary. But this is how we have planned to approach that, introducing supplementary reading materials for all schools, and certainly in the early years.
Doctor, we're rounding off now. My household, we like John Grisham's series a lot. You know, my wife, she reads them quite a lot, and I've also grown love for John Grisham. Do you still read Milton Boom?
Well, I don't know where my colleague got that information
Got the idea from.
I was more into Sidney Sheldon and John Grisham and Enid Blyton.
Okay.
So yeah, I do read. I must confess that I don't read as much as I used to read before. But then in my line of work, you have to read. You have to be updated as to what is happening, not just in country, but in other countries that are similar to yours. So to see what can you potentially learn from that and adapt to the context of Sierra Leone. Okay. So I think it goes without saying, reading is part and parcel of who I am.
Let's just take a few messages as we round off this morning. Ibrahim Senesi Nabiru is saying, Dr. Minister, it is important to align university training with the interest of the corporate world, particularly the area of entrepreneurship. However, most universities in Sierra Leone lack the necessary technological resources for students to apply their studies in practical settings. Additionally, university fees are rising every year, making it difficult for low-income families to afford education. Compounding the issue, the government has stopped providing grant-in-aid support. Education is only making progress on social media, but in real life, it is the opposite. Saad Toure is saying, good morning, AYV, and thank you for hosting the education ministers. My concern is with the recruitment of tech voc teachers who don't have TC or HTC, as that is the requirement set by the Teaching Service Commission. The State of Dwazak is saying our academic sector is full of challenges because of the lack of proper monitoring from the school level to the university. It's sad when people are receiving salaries at the end of the month without any dedication. The classrooms and lecture places are empty because of a lack of monitoring. Osfriend is saying education being a systematic process of training the mind with knowledge. The nation's education capacity of individual beneficiaries seems unspun. Discovery of these unspun talents needs a well-tailored approach to spin out talents to meet with globalization, including practicalities stemming from digital evidence-based approach. Dr. Wuri, our tertiary system is frustrating as a result of the attitude of university workers. Annually, students' grades are missing, and the new academic year will start without students not knowing their fate, whether they will be promoted or not. Osfriend is saying again, has the Ministry of Tertiary Education rectified the issue of home-based science student scholarship fund? There was an issue with those funds redirected to few international students, leaving the home-based students to fend for their funds in pursuit of science careers. Are these funds going to be ring-fenced? Mosdi is saying the difficulties with the critical thinking and or thinking outside the box approach in our education system is, I believe, has to do with our kind of tradition focusing on learning. Sierra Leone's education system from colonial to post-colonial era was mostly based around the traditional Department of Law and Medics. These departments, with all due respect, are focused more on reading and comprehending the applications needed for these disciplines. Lawyers studying particularly law, be it natural or international law, commercial law, constitutional law, etc. Similarly, for the medical department, the same practices apply. In my experience, and probably many other students for my era, many, if not all teachers, would actually query us for attempting to write our exams in our own words. They rather preferred word-for-word approach. Pure common sense is the father of textbook education. When this is tapped into and transformed for human consumption to yield national development, and Osfriend is saying that. Dawda Tarali is saying, our education system is not fit for purpose. We are using yesterday's knowledge to train today's children for tomorrow's technology. We have students in our universities reading BIT and can't even explain how artificial intelligence works. Mosdi is saying our education, in the case of distance or open learning system, is quite interesting and innovative. However, the challenges we face as a country makes it harder to almost impossible, taking into consideration the lack of proper energy supplies and quality internet access. Probably only rich in our society could afford this at the moment. Improve the library standard, reduce the university fees, and reduce the syllabus, then we will begin to have a successful graduate, Swissman is saying. These are the messages so far that we've recorded. Mr. Saki, would you mind to start?
Yes, well, let me start off with the issue of quality in our schools. Again, I did, in my previous submission, I did say that the focus now in terms of education is on improving quality. The first step that we have to take is to review the role of the school quality assurance officers. And we are working with an organization called Leone. We are developing a new framework for our quality assurance officers. And what I really want to see is, you know, if abroad, when an inspector goes into a school, you will know whether at the end of that inspection, whether that school is up to a certain standard or not. So they grade the schools, whether they're outstanding, whether they are good, fair, satisfactory, and so on and so forth. In our system, there's no grading. So you don't even know whether that school has met the minimum standards that you have in education. This is what I want to change. I want to make sure that when a quality assurance officer goes into a school, I would know whether that school is meeting our minimum standards. The parents will know that their school is meeting the minimum standards. The community will know whether that school is meeting the minimum standards. Let me also address the issue of attendance of teachers and attendance of pupils. So we have we're using technology in a program called WIDEA, which gets the school leaders to register the attendance of teachers using biodata. So they either use their thumbprint or they use facial recognition. With that, there is a dashboard which I will have access to in the ministry, and a click of a button, I could tell you which schools are below the benchmark for attendance and which are not. And those who are below the benchmark, we will make sure that our quality assurance officers go into those schools to see how they can support them initially. And if there is a question of leadership, we will make sure that we address that. There's one other thing that I wanted to, that we are working on at the moment, and I say it's work in progress, so I wouldn't want to go too much into detail about this. Several years ago in London, there were certain schools that were underperforming. Invariably, the schools that were underperforming were the schools where you have black kids, a predominance of black kids. So the political leadership at the time decided that this cannot be right. It is not equitable. It doesn't promote equal opportunities. And so they started a program called the London Challenge, which is a comprehensive framework to support schools that are underperforming. We are working on something similar right now, because I want to make sure that when we talk about radical inclusion, we are not just referring to individuals. We want to make sure that the institutions are radically included in the high quality that we want, and no school should be left behind, irrespective of where that school is located. And that's something that we are working on right now, and it's something that once it's ready, we will make an announcement.
Doctor?
Thank you very much. So there was a question about the granting aid scheme, and someone also mentioned about home-based funds being diverted to international students. This is the second time I'm hearing that, and my response has always been that has never been the case. The granting aid, yes, we had to put a pause on the granting aid scheme because it had the best intentions to remove the financial barrier, but then in reality it had its own challenges. When I assumed office, I inherited backlogs going back to 2013, 2015, thereabout, wherein we owed in learning institutions money that we had given students by the granting aid scheme. So we have introduced the loan scheme, the student loan scheme, and for now it's been piloted for postgraduate students. So for the first year it was piloted for postgraduate students, and now it's being made available also for postgraduate students. And we can all agree that if you want to when you introduce something newly, you're not going to go full force. You do it gradually, and lessons learned you use to scale up. So funds are not being diverted to international students. They have separate budget lines, and that is not the case. But what we are doing for the granting aid scheme is that we are retaining a component of it that's yet to be launched. And there's specific groups that we have identified. So one, female students studying specific STEAM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, agriculture, and mathematics, and there will be a quota for that, and we will define what those fields will be linked to our national development plan. And the reason why we're introducing that for female students is because these are sectors that are historically dominated by men, and we have the GWE Act saying 30% minimum female representation in leadership positions. To ensure that we do not play lip service to that, we have to train the young women now so they can take up the leadership roles within these historically male-dominated sectors and change that narrative. So we also have a category for persons living with disability and other categories. We have the scholarship policy, which we've recently revised, and that would be made available to the public, which clearly will, in the interest of transparency, will spell out what the different categories are. There was also another question about missing grades. Yes, that's an ongoing challenge where students, their grades are not submitted on time, they promote themselves, and it creates a whole lot of problems. That will entail us working with the universities to strengthen their governance structures. Internally, they have governance structures. We strengthen that and ensure that we have clearly defined roles and responsibilities, clearly defined timelines, and we work towards that. That's for the short term. In the medium to long term, we're looking to use technology. There's a concept note that we have developed called Smart SL, where we want to have dedicated ICT spaces, so multi-purpose ICT suites that will be utilized for digital skills training, research, learning, and all of that, but also to be used for exams, and that will help in terms of efficiency and transparency and accountability as well. There was also a question about ODL, but then it will introduce another layer of inequality. Whatever we do within the Ministry of Technical and Higher Education, we do it through the gender equality, social justice and inclusivity lens. We do not introduce something that will disadvantage some students, and only those who can afford are able to access that. So we're working with partners. So first, green technology, green energy. So if we have these multi-purpose ICT suites, they will have green energy, so we don't have to deal with the issue of power cuts and whatnot. And then we're working with a partner to introduce sustainable and reliable internet connection into all of our higher educational institutions in a phased approach. That will ensure that you have the space. So if you don't have a device, you can go and access, use this ICT space. You have sustained power, and you have sustained reliable internet connectivity, so that way nobody's disadvantaged. And there was also another question about textbook way of learning, and this also links to the question that you raised earlier. And just to add to that, so critical thinking is something that we need to instill in our young people. And I mentioned the platform that we're developing with the partner in India. So there will be a component of critical thinking module in there, but also the way we assess. So it's not just about you learning and regurgitating what you have learned, but thinking outside the box, how you can apply what you have learned in a real life setting in the form of assessment. We also have internships, a dual apprenticeship policy that creates a partnership with industry players, where a young person will be able to have on-the-job training and be able to see in real life what they have learned being applied in a real life setting, and help them to think outside the box and move away from this textbook way of doing things.
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Hajar Rahmatullah Wuri, she's a Minister of Technical and Higher Education. And before her, you've been listening to the Minister of Higher Education, Technical and Higher Education, and that is Mr. Conrad Saki. This morning we've gotten a 4K picture of what exactly our education system looks like in Sierra Leone at the moment. We wish you well, and we do hope to be having you subsequently on our editions of this program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.